Welcome back to Catholic Conversations, the official podcast for the Diocese of Syracuse. I'm your host, Joelle Zarnowski, and today we are joined by our shepherd, Bishop Douglas Lucia. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, thank you, Joelle.
And happy Christmas Eve. Merry Christmas Eve to everybody, because this episode will be airing right on Christmas Eve.
Oh, very good.
Yeah, so with that, we've been talking about the Advent season on our last couple of episodes and really talking about focusing on the Advent season, but now we're moving into Christmas.
Right.
And it's so easy nowadays for people with all of the commercialism and, shopping for gifts and decorating the tree and, preparing for that one day to have your family all over to kind of forget the focus on Christ. So can you talk a little bit about why that's so important for us as Catholics to focus on Christ and what the true meaning of Christmas is for us?
Yeah. Well, it's interesting when we talk about Christmas because, everybody seems to, it's a work up to Christmas Day. But really, as Catholics, the season of Advent is really leading us into another season. That for us, Christmas isn't just one day. In fact, in the tradition of the church, the Christmas season will begin on Christmas Eve and with the Vigil Mass of Christmas and will actually last until the baptism of the Lord on January 12th. And so we actually have a Christmas season. Christmas is really just the beginning of our feasting. In fact, and that's where also the origin, and if we have time later, we'll talk about a little bit more, but the whole origin of the 12 days of Christmas is actually that idea that Christmas isn't just a day. And that's why during the Christmas season, we celebrate different parts of the Christmas story. Like the Sunday after Christmas will be Holy Family Sunday. January 1st, we call to mind Mary, the Mother of God. Then right around the 6th of January, we celebrate the Epiphany, that whole story of the visit of the wise men, of the three kings. And then, like I say, we round out our Christmas celebration with Jesus' own baptism. And especially that whole idea that with Christmas begins a mission. And so for people, I think, just like we call to mind certain favorite Christmas stories, like 'Twas the Night Before Christmas, or an even day these days, a little bit more familiar. Dr. Seuss's The Grinch Who Stole Christmas. Yeah. I mean, they're all familiar with us. But again, really, what we're beginning on Christmas Day itself or Christmas Eve is the telling of a story that that's meant to go on not just for 24 hours.
Right. Yeah. And with that, obviously we have a lot of families who are going to be celebrating Christmas with their young children. And so, of course, they celebrate the day of Christmas with opening gifts. Santa came to visit the night before. But what are some ways that maybe families could incorporate this Christmas season into their family traditions? Calling to mind the kids, you had mentioned the 12 Days of Christmas. I know that was always popular when I was a kid, singing the song.
Right. Well, I think one thing that I think would help, and I remember this was something when we were kids and when I was a kid growing up, and one of the things my mother and father, I must admit, I must have been maybe 6, 7 years old. I don't think I was older than that, but they built a family creche. And they had and I can remember at the time, I think the figurines came from Woolworths and things like that. But I remember my dad built the stable, which I still have. In fact, this year it's in my office. But I just remember that was always part of the story. And then another part of the story was always that working up to Christmas Eve Mass. And we would go, the parish I grew up did not have midnight Mass, but we had Mass maybe about 7 o'clock in the evening. But we go to the evening Mass. And then after that, there was just a little time of celebration before, okay, go to bed, get ready for Santa. But yet in the next morning, to me, I can remember it was not just about the presents, but it was about family. And that even Christmas Day, it was meant to be a family day.
Right.
And And one of the things, just a simple thing, but even at sitting down at the table, just saying grace, just so those little things I think can help.
Mhm.
Singing of Christmas carols, not just Jingle Bells or Frosty the Snowman, but singing some of our religious carols.
Mm.
Again, they can tell the story,
Right.
and so those are things I think families can do. And like, since usually the week before or the week between Christmas and New Year's is a time of when families have school children at least are off from school, and sometimes businesses aren't as busy or there's more time off.
Right.
Well, those are things. Those are times where I want to say, don't take down the decorations, leave them up, and just continue that celebration. Continue to focus on the Christmas story.
Yeah. Yeah. I know our family leaves our tree up through the Epiphany.
Right.
We're not allowed. My mom still is like, nope, we are not taking the tree down before Epiphany. It has to stay up.
Right.
So that's always been a family tradition for us. And then, of course, we have our nativity set that we always set up together every year.
Right.
And even as adults, me and my siblings are all grown, but we still do that with our parents every year as adults. We go home and do that with them. So those are some really great traditions.
Right.
So speaking of our theme for Advent this year was Journey to Bethlehem and Beyond. So that calls to mind the Nativity story.
Right.
So the Nativity story, do you have a favorite part of the Nativity story? And maybe could you explain to us why that part of it is so important to you? What you think is so special about it?
I think as a kid, my favorite part were the wise men. There's just something, call it mysterious, about them, but the story of them coming from the east, but yet also bringing their gifts and bringing their gifts. But and then as an adult, I realized that having encountered Jesus, I got home by another route. That this meeting with Jesus is meant to change us.
Yeah.
So I think as a child, they were the ones that fascinated me. And one of my favorite stories actually is the story by O. Henry called The Fourth Wise Man, which is the story of a wise man who was supposed to be a magi who was supposed to be part of the original group, but he never seems to catch up. And his gift was going to be a bag of precious jewels.
Oh.
But the gist of the story is, as he's trying to catch up with Jesus, he ends up giving away these jewels because of people who he meets in need.
Mm-hmm.
But that the day he actually meets Jesus is the day of the crucifixion. And he says, and the wise man's so upset, wanted to be there for you. I just wanted, and the beautiful words of Jesus to him, and as Henry says, you were there for me. When I was hungry, you gave me food. When I was, and so I think that's such a powerful image. So the wise men in particular.
Yeah.
The other, I will have to say that there's a close second, and that's the shepherds. And again, for me, just the idea that they were nobodies. They're out in the field. They weren't really welcome in town. That's why they were out in the field. And yet God goes to them. God speaks to them. They matter. So those would be some of the aspects of the Christmas story that are really special.
Great. Yeah. So we did talk about how December 25th is just the beginning of the Christmas
Right.
season, and we're going to move forward into that through the baptism of the Lord.
Right.
So how can we continue to live out that joy and hope of Christmas through that part of the season?
Well, again, I think, first of all, just taking time to be with family, taking time to just enjoy one another's company. I like when I hear, families will say during that time, we had a movie night, or we went sledding together, or we went.
Yeah.
So just family time is a good thing. In addition to that, I again, meals together or just celebrating together. Again, that whole idea of just being present to one another, which I think to me is even more important than the presents we give each other,
Mm-hmm.
but that gift of self.
Yeah.
So I think especially in Christmas, once the quote unquote glamour of the gifts gets over, on it's a time where we can then, what do I say, share ourselves. Even for kids, it's like, oh, I got a new game, I got a new toy. All right, spending time with a sibling, or spending time with cousin or whatever, and just enjoying that together.
Yeah. Yeah. That is, as an adult, my favorite part of the season now. The gifts
Hmm.
don't so much excite me as an adult because it's always
Yeah.
practical stuff that we need.
Right.
But I do really always look forward to having my family together. We do, coming from a Polish family, we always do Christmas Eve or Vigila,
Hmm.
and with like the fish and the
Hmm.
meatless meal, pierogies, and all of that. And I look forward to it every year to have that time with my family because we don't
Right.
exchange gifts with my dad's whole side of the family. We just
Right.
do that dinner together. All the cousins are there, aunts
Yeah.
and uncles, and it's so great to spend that time with them.
Right.
So I
Yeah.
completely agree. So with this, right after Christmas this year, we're going to be celebrating another big event globally in the
Hmm.
church, not just here in our diocese, which is the start of the Jubilee year.
That's right.
So, with that, what is your vision and your hope for us as we move into this Jubilee year with the theme Pilgrims of Hope?
Yeah. Well, the neat thing about the Jubilee is it will happen on the Sunday after Christmas, our beginning in this diocese of the Jubilee year, with a special Mass at the cathedral on Holy Family Sunday. And so for me, the Jubilee is, again, part of it is just that invitation to really, and I said this in my Jubilee message, but the idea of walking closer. I think of that hymn so often. I just want to start singing "Just a Closer Walk with Thee," but that's really what this is about. Is it's an invitation to walk closer with the Lord, and part of it then is, and this I remember from the Jubilee year back in 1975, but part of it is reconciliation, in the sense of getting rid of things that impede our relationship with the Lord. Like, maybe I've been too selfish. Maybe I've just been focusing on myself. Um, Maybe I haven't really taken time to listen to God's word, or to even take time for prayer, or in some instances, well, do I get to Mass each week? To me, this year, and that's really what a Jubilee year is all about. It's about, all right, looking at where one's at and saying, all right, have I sort of got off track here a little bit?
Mm-hmm.
And it's really about getting back on track.
Right, right.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we're going to have that opening mass on the
Right.
Sunday after Christmas.
Right.
And then we'll have a lot of events through that Jubilee year that we'll
Right.
announce as time goes. So our listeners should be keeping an eye out for that.
That's right.
And we will just be celebrating it every way that we can here in the diocese. But there
Right.
will be stuff going on globally as well. So we'll share information that comes from the Vatican and everything too. So
And it's interesting that the symbol we're being invited to use in our local churches is that of a particular cross. And that what we're invited to do is to follow Christ, who, with the cross, actually brings us that message of hope. Because we know the cross is not the end of the story, that it leads to the resurrection, to new life.
right,
And so that's really an important part of our Jubilee pilgrimage.
right, right. Well, it's so great. I'm really looking forward to seeing what we have coming up in the new
Mhm.
year and the Jubilee year. And just thank you to all of our listeners for tuning in today. And do you have any final message that you want to give to our listeners before we sign off?
Well, again, really invite them to Jubilee year, just so you know, they know a couple of the special events coming up will be a diocesan retreat that will be March 31st and April 1st and 2nd. And there will be more details coming out on that. There'll be a diocesan pilgrimage in September during the beauty of fall, where we were going to go to the Divine Mercy Shrine and Stockbridge Mass. So there are different events we want to do along with the Jubilee celebrations that will happen throughout the year. So again, we just want to invite people to enter into the hope that this Jubilee year brings. And that's certainly my prayer for them, that they will come to know that what we celebrate at Christmas, Emmanuel, God with us.
Thank you so much for being here today, Bishop. And again, thank you to our listeners for tuning in. We will see you again next week with Bishop Lucia to talk about New Year's. Merry Christmas, everyone.